All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So this session is recorded, and thank you all again for joining. I will send out a copy of the recording at the end of this. So essentially, we have a panel here for you today. So it won't be a long PowerPoint for you to listen to. So if you'd like to turn on grid view so that you can see all of our beautiful people here, at the top of your screen, there should be a circle. You can click on that and then select grid view to view the whole panel once John is done sharing his screen. And with that, you can ask questions and Q&A throughout. We did gather some questions from you as you filled out the form to join today. But if you have anything that you want to add, go ahead and do that in the Q&A or the chat, and we will monitor that throughout. But with that, I'm going to give it to Rob Messmer to moderate our panel.
Thanks, Gabby. And a little bit of feedback. I think most people on the call know John and Matt and myself. We've teased up this this webinar because Craig, we're so honored to have you join us. And we'll probably, I don't know that John or Matt will talk much during this panel. I don't even know why we call it a panel, because we'd really love to learn more about your background and history with VeloCloud, and we spend quite a bit of time in our section of IT in the channel, and really prophesizing VeloCloud. And so it's great to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of the story behind VeloCloud, but a little bit about you personally.
Thanks. It's great to be here, and great to hear people evangelizing VeloCloud as well. I've been in this space, this WAN space, since 2007, when I joined the founding engineering team at Talari Networks. And I think that was kind of the first time we looked at, can we do what MPLS is doing, but do it across the public internet? And then I went to Cisco for a short time in advanced development, looking at forward-looking R&D, and then I got a chance to join the founding engineering team at VeloCloud about 7.5 years ago. And what really struck me at that time in early 2018 was the way the cloud was just becoming something part of our daily lives. And this notion of making the cloud a cohesive part of your network infrastructure, I thought was really innovative. It was very forward-looking, but I think if you look back at times, at some point someone said people will never do banking in the cloud, people will never do healthcare in the cloud, and all of the other things that have moved. And it was really, a good amount of foresight, because if you look at the way the world has evolved in the last 7.5, it's really underscored the approach we took. So the things that we looked at doing, bringing in the cloud gateway concept so that network optimization wasn't just about site to site anymore. It was also looking at applications moving to the cloud and automation, network automation. So, can we help users so they don't have to spend a lot of time configuring WAN QoS rules? And can we automate some of the more mundane tasks that network engineers have to go through so that they can focus on network design and application transformation and some of these things that are coming? I think, it's been reassured through time that was a good approach, and it's been an exciting journey to be a part.
I do want to ask you, because this has bothered me for some time, and I'm a cyclist, so I have always called it VeloCloud, but I hear some folks say Velo. Is that, put this to rest, or is that something that you don't care what you're called as long as it's you guys in the conversation?
So it is VeloCloud. The original tagline way back when was increasing your velocity to the cloud. So that is where the name came from, velocity and cloud. So it is VeloCloud.
Okay, well, I've got a lot of bets to clean up around the country and
I think
nationally.
the other bets we got to clean up too is we've got to start using the terms VMware SD-WAN by VeloCloud, right?
That's
right.
Part
of what we've got to learn to speak as well. So
Yeah, that's a mouthful. I will. I'll try to add that. So, with VeloCloud, tell us, Craig. You talked about the gateways. Is that kind of the core differentiator when you think of how you differentiate yourself from other competitors? What is it that are there certain things that just kind of jump to the top of your mind? Either when it was at the outset or now, and have those changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at from the outset, there were two key things that we tried to do. The first was the gateways. And this is something that even today, I don't think any of our competitors have done a good job replicating, because what the gateway serves as is your clouds, both from a network simplification standpoint, but also from an optimization, traffic engineering standpoint. So, I always use this analogy, like when people talk about driving in a car, you always think when you get on the highway, it's usually smooth sailing. Now, that's not true for folks that live in the Bay Area like me, but for most folks, once you get on the highway, it's smooth sailing. But it takes a long time to get to the highway, weaving through neighborhoods, lots of traffic jams. Most of the accidents happen in those side streets. And I've always thought of the gateway as like an on-ramp from your house directly to the highway. Because what we're doing is we're bookending your last mile. So we've built this optimized on-ramp to SaaS. We've got 40 gig fiber links, we've got blended transit, we've got a NOC team monitoring them, we've got peering relationships with these transit providers. And then we've got all these SP partners that deploy their own gateways that are adjacent to their core, that have their own peering relationships, that have their own resilient transport. So you have all these on-ramps to these various networks, be it SaaS networks, IaaS networks, service provider networks. And what this architecture allows us to do is build an overlay using one or more links from your end location to those gateways. And not just steer around problems that happen, like a lot of SD-WANs do, but actually mitigate problems that are happening. Even with a single link, even with lots of packet loss, you can still get high quality business connectivity, even for an application living in the cloud. And I don't think there's any other vendor that can really claim that. People try to do it with deploying virtual machines inside of AWS and things like that, but you don't have control over the transit there. It's not really the same experience as going to an SP's data center or going to a Velo hosted data center. And so that's really a huge differentiator. And the screenshot here showing Office 365 throughput, a great example of this. And we always try to show like this is ThousandEyes, now Cisco ThousandEyes. So obviously a very objective measurement of what we're doing. We always try to not show how we measure performance, but how independent third-party tools measure the performance of those things. The other thing is that optimization itself. So our protocol, and we call it dynamic multipath optimization, that allows us to steer traffic at a per packet level and do remediation on the fly. So, there's a couple key differentiators that people don't necessarily realize when they look at other SD-WAN vendors and then VMware SD-WAN. The first is that everything we do, measurement-wise, error correction-wise, traffic steering-wise, is unidirectional. So we are measuring the upstream and the downstream independently. And while that might not matter for a classic MPLS symmetric link or a symmetric fiber link or something like that, when you start getting into residential broadband, where upstream congestion is a huge problem, or 4G, 5G type links, where downstream is tremendously better than upstream, what our solution allows is measure and use those paths independently. So you might avoid the 4G upstream because it's very low throughput, low quality, but be able to fully utilize that high quality 4G downstream bandwidth that you have. So that unidirectional mechanism is one big differentiator. The other is that we're per packet. And per packet allows a couple things. I mean, obviously, one thing it allows for is aggregation. So everyone loves the demo where they connect an edge to a gateway and they go to speedtest.net and they see they got the combined bandwidth of both links. But practically, I would say there aren't that many applications where aggregate is very valuable. It's certainly helpful for things like backups and things like that. For most applications, the biggest value of per packet steering comes from our ability to switch instantly on the next packet without any consideration of migrating the session or worrying about session state or worrying about which link we natted traffic out of to egress to the internet. We've got this bookended solution. We've got this per packet steering. We can move traffic at any time to in a sub-second fashion.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, you know, John, Gartner has, you know, basically reinforced, you know, the messaging Craig said by putting them up in the, you know, upper right quadrant. The trick, I think, is how do we communicate all that value, all that technology so that our partners can talk to a customer and have them realize that not only that it you know, the benefits, but that it's not just marketing fluff.
I think so. It's funny, you know, where Craig talked about where he got his start. When we formed an exploratory committee, myself and Matt Douglas were a part of that, caused back in 2015, early 2015, around looking at SD-WAN. And Matt and I were convinced at the time, we hadn't looked at VeloCloud yet. And when we saw what some of the other ones, we were convinced that Talari was going to be it, right? And then we got through and continued looking at more and more and more and kept an open mind. And I think the big thing with VeloCloud, you know, the DMPO is an incredible technology. That only goes so far when the application leaves the network. And so without that gateway that Craig talked about, and without cloud management, without the ability when a customer says, help me understand that this is not marketecture, that it's really architecture. I think that the key is being able to quickly, because it's cloud delivered, I'm agile and I can quickly stand up an environment. I can do physical hardware, virtual appliances. The gateways are hosted, multi-tenanted, they're already there. And so I can quickly stand up, whether it's in our lab, we've built kind of a battle lab environment where we've got all these circuits coming into our VMware SD-WAN lab. But I can show you that traffic. I can show you moving it over. We can show you the results of the tests we did, the week-long test back in 2016 when we partnered with VMware SD-WAN. So for us, it's the proof's in the pudding. You simply look at what are the applications we use most often, especially today, meaning in work from home. It's my phone, it's video. Those are not hosted at my house. Even if they're back in my data center, I think one of the things Craig hit on is we never would have taken banking to the cloud or healthcare. Now here we are. I think the other thing is realizing that all of a sudden in our network really is the cloud now, because we went from maybe 3 sites in a data center to 400 remote sites coming back. So I think people are in the cloud whether they want to be or not. And with VeloCloud's ability to quickly stand up and be agile and show that application, or show the DMPO slide, not only show that that application is performing better, like with Thousand Eyes or some other SNMP now, not only is it performing better, but as it leaves your network and as your employees leave your network, we're able to show that we're continuing that on-ramp that Craig talked about.
Yeah, got it. Craig, you know, we hear a lot about, you know, it's interesting. We got into SD-WAN in large part because of our voice background. We never, when we, at the outset, thought we always wanted to provide a private circuit for our voice customers so that we had that, you know, QoS down to their headquarters, to their phone. We saw SD-WAN as an opportunity to unlock that private circuit. But then, as you mentioned earlier, as the explosion to cloud happened, we saw it in a lot of different applications outside of voice. The other thing that we saw move generationally almost overnight was security, because now when you're not hub and spoking back to corporate with private MPLS, and you're starting to see the benefits of SD-WAN in reality, all of a sudden now you've got next gen security that you may not have had before, because you're not piping it all back to corporate out of some big drain. How has VeloCloud seen kind of the complement of security, UTM, malware protection, as John's finding the slides to my questions. Thank you, John. how does VeloCloud see that kind of interplay with security as companies really embrace SD-WAN?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to that question, right? And the first side is SASE, and we have to talk about SASE when we talk about security in this space. If you look at what SASE, consolidation of a handful of services, cloud firewalling, secure web gateways, ZTNA, and SD-WAN in this thin branch, thick cloud style model. So SASE says these compute heavy things, you should move them to the cloud. That way you don't have to worry about them. You should distribute those the cloud into points of presence that are regionalized so that the on-ramp is shorter to reach those services. And if you think about what we just talked about a little while ago with the gateway, that sounds very familiar, right? Because that's what we did 7 years ago. We built this network of gateways. We said, we're going to put the heavyweight SD-WAN compute in the cloud, put a thin branch, distribute the cloud geographically. And now we're the only SD-WAN vendor, when we talk about pivoting to SASE, that has our own network of data centers ready to build out and facilitate that transformation. So you'll definitely see more in that space, like you saw our announcement in June that we added ZTNA with Workspace ONE connecting into our SD-WAN gateways. I think the other side of it, though, is SASE is all about market consolidation and single vendor, single pane of glass, network simplification. And there's definitely credence to that, and we see it in the industry. But I really believe that best in breed is never going to go away. And there's always going to be customers who say, I've had customers come to me and they say, look, my security provider is Check Point, and I think Check Point's the best, and I want you to tell me how you work with Check Point. And we talk about how we do Check Point VNF deployed on our edge, and how we do connections from the edge directly to CloudGuard, and how we do connections from the gateway to CloudGuard. And so being able to facilitate in a flexible way, either an intrinsic security solution from a single vendor or working with best in breed security vendors. We call this our network of cloud strategy. So being able to connect with the names you see on the slide, I think that's always going to be important, and there's always going to be customers that demand that. So you want to make sure you have a solution that gives you the opportunity for both.
Yep. Matt, anything to add there?
Well, I was actually going to say to John, John, talk a little bit about what we've been doing with Check Point, right? You got the slide there, but describe exactly what some of our methodology has been about bringing these two worlds together, if you would.
Yeah, so I certainly echo Craig's sentiment, which is there's a lot of value in the Workspace ONE, and there's a lot of value as we've seen a lot of what I would say is aggressive growth from VMware in this space and having this single pane of glass. On the flip side, where we've really been looking to take advantage of the market is that best of breed mentality. And so when we go out to the market and we look at all of these different secure internet gateways, SASEs, CASBs, SIGs, all the different acronyms, we're putting your firewall in the cloud. We wanted to be able to offer, we recognize our unique security perspectives. And so I have my work from home user that's different than my roaming user working from the road, working from the coffee shop. That's different than my branch user that's just going out to the internet for most applications, but maybe a route back to the data center. That's different than my site that needs to inspect east-west traffic. And that's different than my data center that has a third-party rail or is hosting, whether public or private, 80 and 443 applications, right, for inbound web apps. And then there's also, you can get into the IaaS and PaaS world and all of the other pieces of security. So for us, it was important to look at who's the partner that we can take the same ideas of why we really love Velo and VMware's SD-WAN product, right? Which is scalable and flexible, cloud distributed, easy zero-touch provisioning, right? And we took that same concept across our security market and said, how can we offer a single pane of glass regardless of if I'm doing my VMware SD-WAN at a branch and I want to inspect east-west traffic, but I don't want a hardware footprint? Great. I've got a low-profile VNF that'll run directly on VMware's SD-WAN edge. But what if I'm working from home? Great, we build a great VMware SD-WAN 510 LTE with a Check Point license offering. And so or we've got the physical hardware in the data center. As we looked across when we productized what we wanted to do with CloudGuard Connect and with the Check Point suite was, how do I complement what we've already been doing for customers for 5 years with the VMware SD-WAN platform? And for us, that's best of breed. We continue to integrate where the VMware roadmap continues to go as well, recognizing, to Craig's point, some customers are going to want this and some are going to want that. And our job is to be able to make sure we're delivering that with a easy to consume wrapper to the end partner and the end customer.
I think the important thing for customers to remember is, SASE is big in the hype cycle right now. There's a lot of companies rushing to try to ride that wave of hype. And, one thing you'll never hear me say is good enough security. That's a term that people throw around, right? And I think something that we take seriously at VMware is, we're the leader in SD-WAN, Workspace ONE, tens of millions of devices under management. We believe that's a best-in-breed solution for UEM, for ZTNA. Bringing those together, you're not going to hear us unveil other components of our SASE solution unless we can stand behind them as being best in breed. So, be wary of vendors that say we have the best security and we have good enough SD-WAN, or we have the best SD-WAN, we have good enough security, or we have great security in SD-WAN and we'll put it in AWS and that's a good enough cloud service. Right? You really want, if you're really going to embark on SASE, you really want someone who's best in breed in all three areas before you put your business infrastructure in their hands.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's a good point.
Rob, let me add a little bit to what I think this allows us to do from a customer-facing perspective too. One of the things that I think I and my sales engineering team have been most excited about is that these tools, the VeloCloud, the Checkpoint, all the things we're talking about, allow us really to be meeting with customers and start talking about business outcomes. We actually will write on a whiteboard, right, that we build what we believe is outcome-based networking. And so a lot of our work is sitting with the customer and saying, okay, what are your applications that are going site to site? What are going site to data center, site to SaaS application, site to AWS or Azure? Now this work from home component, right? And then how do we layer in the right security solutions? And I think that particular VeloCloud, Checkpoint, and CBTS's kind of position as a managed service provider really allows us to build very customer specific solutions, really like outcome-based networking for a customer. And then when you peel back some of these layers and you sit and even go to the whiteboard and talk about how we can talk about fixing packet loss for a voice call real time over a cable connection, which you guys know in our world, right? We've got a number of good retail chains, brands of food you buy that are using this technology, right, to ensure a reliable phone call when you're calling up and ordering that pizza. So it's a pretty interesting world out there now. Now it takes time, right? Because, and that's one of the things I wanted to ask, Craig a little bit too. There's so much FUD out there on the SD-WAN side, and then people, they'll get tied to this particular brand. Like I talked to a partner earlier today, and they're like, well, every time if a customer says they want to see application performance, I always recommend CloudGenix. And I'm like, oh, that's not a really great reason necessary to do that. So one, I just want to finish up with this is, I think, it's a unique time for us as partners and folks in the channel to be talking about business outcomes and building an outcome-based network for customers. But talk to me a little bit about how do we fight these misconceptions, particularly around some of the session-based technologies that, might have some sexier interfaces in a couple of places, but aren't necessarily the same performance. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think, we've got more than 285,000 sites deployed now on VeloCloud, and I wonder at what point are people going to stop doubting that it works? Right?
That's great, sure.
But there's we don't like to belittle the competition. There's obviously a lot of different vendors out there that solve a lot of different use cases. I think you'll find vendors try to find a niche that they can hang on to and work for it. And it's true that, for instance, in VeloCloud products, now VMware SD-WAN, throughout our history, we haven't put a lot of visibility to the product. We kind of took a different approach, which was we'll make your network better from the bottom up. So applications are changing really fast. Application signatures are changing really fast. We don't expect you to tell us this is the 5 tuple that's important, and then show me the MOS scores for voice traffic matching that 5 tuple. Because if you're doing that, you're already spending a lot of time managing your network, and that's the thing that we were trying to prevent, right? We wanted to give you this, this magic black box that would just make your voice work. So, we've had customers complain that we put maintenance notifications as banners inside our orchestrator portal, right? And I have customers tell me, you've made it so I don't ever have to log into the orchestrator, so I don't even see the notification. So that's what we want. We want the network to be working so well that you forget about it and you're not looking for application performance metrics. Now, there are always customers that want that level of visibility, obviously, and we see that. In February, we acquired Neonsa, which is one of the leaders in application monitoring and problem isolation for LAN and Wi-Fi vendors. And, obviously we're looking at how we bring those two products together. We'll have some exciting things to talk about at VMworld about that. So, we're always looking to how we can better solve some of those use cases like application visibility. But again, our core value comes from the fact that you shouldn't need to worry about application performance because it just works.
That's a great point. Yep.
Craig, I'm interested. We mentioned this a couple times. Early on, you said you'll never do your banking on the internet as kind of an analogy to what we're seeing, and with 285,000 sites up, what are the industries that I guess you're a little surprised have that maybe you thought would lag that are, I mean, retail makes sense, right? That it's going to be an early adopter, and we've seen that. What are some of the verticals that you thought, wow, I thought these, I thought this was going to take a while, and we just signed up a blankety, some type of customer?
Yeah, I think banking is obviously one, right? There's a couple major, and there's banks whose names you'd see on football stadiums that are using our product, right? In their branches, in their ATMs, and using cloud-hosted versions of our product, which is something that I was very surprised to see. Not even a fully on-prem deployment. So I think that's a big one. Healthcare is another big one. The telemedicine use case is obviously very strong. We've had great success with customers like MD Anderson doing that. But one of our major local hospitals here in the Bay Area, the entire hospital and all of their satellite medical offices are running on VeloCloud as well. And so I think it's a surprise to me. I guess it shouldn't be, because it makes sense that these are the kind of businesses that need that network reliability and that agility and are undergoing transformations themselves. I talked about applications changing so quickly. I think hospitals are a great example of that. More and more IoT devices, more and more network-enabled functionality that's happening. X-ray machines are connected to the internet and all sorts of other things today. And so they're looking for that agility where they don't have to worry about when they bring in a new medical device that has to connect to the internet, how do they make it work? How do they make sure it has good quality of service? So in some ways, I'm surprised to see those industries adopt this, but I guess in other ways, it does make sense from some of those core value points we talked about.
Yeah, Matt or John, thoughts on that?
Well, banking for us has been some of the early wins. I mean, right off the bat, when we went back 3 years ago, we saw several 20-location credit unions, et cetera, who needed that redundancy, right? And even one of the things I think that's been great for us, again, the fact that VeloCloud has these tools is oftentimes we're going into customers too, and it's not always about completely tearing apart an MPLS or existing wide area network. Oftentimes a 30, 40, 50 location company, we're keeping maybe headquarters, a couple data centers and distribution still on a hybrid environment of MPLS networks, but using other branches then for use the internet there. And now this work from home, what are we going to be doing with placing nodes for people in the work from home environment? So for us, really, the VeloCloud approach of the flexibility of to use these different components to, again, build very customer specific solutions for whatever their application flows are, that's been the real strength.
I think, Matt, one thing that I would add, obviously Craig hit on what we would consider as the auditory compliance industries, right? Finance, health. one of my surprises, we've been having a great deal of success in financial, not necessarily retail banking, but investment-based banking and personal finance. And these are the organizations, a lot of them are out of New York, but there's other big cities as well, where we're seeing a lot of success with VMware SD-WAN. And what's crazy to me about it, it's not about the security, because I know we're using encrypted tunnels, and I know there's a lot of, I would say, assumptions made about MPLS when you're getting it from a carrier that's got 900 engineers and managing the routers. And I think there's a lot of assumed security blanket in private networking that maybe isn't really there. But when we go and look at these giant, the same 40 cities, it's Tokyo, it's Singapore, it's London, it's Hong Kong, it's New York, it's Chicago, San Francisco, right? These are networks that measure downtime with numbers with a comma in it, right? Like that's the amount of every minute I lose however many thousands of dollars. They have dual MPLS, or they call it the red network and the green network, and they have multiple carriers and all this diversity. And that's something that I've seen them, I've been surprised by how quickly after a POC or maybe a pilot, they were willing to go from, we're working with one right now, has 3 MPLS links, and they're like, give me 1 MPLS and a broadband. And I think that speaks volumes to, VeloCloud being able to, when Craig talks about, it just works. So why do I have to prove it to you if everyone's happy and it just works? And then the per packet steering, the ability for a session to move over without having to go through the normal link state or session state setup and things like that. That's been more of a surprise to me, is how quickly giant customers who don't trust public transport have started to trust it from a performance standpoint, even more so than security.
Yep. How have you seen those in organizations that are deploying it that might historically, earned their keep being the Cisco administrator of rules and policies, and now, Craig, I don't know if you kind of said this, it's made it so easy through the interface, or it just works, that some of that, do you see folks are threatened by the actual coding and the work of the typical network engineer?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so there's a couple answers to that. The first is, I'm a network engineer first and foremost. And I mentioned I worked at Cisco. I know Cisco CLI. One of the things that people hopefully never learn about me is I'm still the top of the escalation tree for VMware SD-WAN. So when customers have major problems, I'm still the one who jumps in to help. And I've been there on a customer's ASR 9K, helping them reconfigure BGP so that they can resolve an issue that they're having, right? So those skills are never going away, even for me, let alone for anyone else in the industry. And I always say, it's not about automating away network engineers. It's about automating away the monotonous parts of our job that we don't want to do over and over again, setting up yet another site-to-site VPN tunnel, configuring hierarchical rules on my branch router over and over and over again. Those kind of monotonous things, handling customer support calls. There's a great graph we have from one of our customers who deployed us to home agents for a voice use case, where they graphed their VeloCloud deployment against the ServiceNow tickets they got for WAN issues like VPN dropping, phones not working. And it's literally like an X on the graph, right? Because as they deployed these things, people stopped calling the help desk. And that has opened up the door for that company to do containerized application transformation and to deploy other forward-looking initiatives in networking that they couldn't have done otherwise. So whether it's through SD-WAN or something else, I mean, we all have to stay on our skills. I think Python programming and Terraform and Ansible, and these things are becoming a part of all of our lives. But I think in order to embrace that and have the time to learn those new technologies and get comfortable with them, you need to stop spending so much time on that monotonous stuff that we used to do in the past. And that's really what SD-WAN is about.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it.
We see it in the field all the time, Rob. I mean, IT staffs are under tremendous pressure. More and more work is coming on them, less and less folks. And even those frontline people who used to love to hug their ISRs, you were starting to come in, and once you explain to them what this can do, they're like, that's great. I got plenty of other work in the network to take care of. So it's an interesting, even going in, to going in. It's like the UCaaS story, right? It used to be we were afraid to go in and sell UCaaS because of the people hugging their telephone switches. Those, as the staffs become overworked, there's less resources, and you go in now and UCaaS is helping even people who manage, quote, the telephone system. UCaaS is giving them better interfaces and more time to do other work. So we're actually not seeing that much pushback, if you would, from the folks hugging their ISRs. So.
Look, with the time we have remaining, about 10 minutes left, let's talk about the future of SD-WAN, what we think this starts looking like in the next couple of years, things to address. Craig, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on, with your background at Tulare, and Cisco and obviously Velo and VM, where do you see this heading? Where do you, industry in general, and then VeloCloud's kind of part of it?
Well, I hope those are the same answer, and that's us leading the industry along that path. I mean, there's 5 strategic adjacencies that we talk about where we see potential for expansion of the market, and I think those really line up with the areas that the industry is growing. The first is edge compute, both classic applications as well as modernized applications. Cisco made an announcement about Cisco CN-WAN, an open source connector for Kubernetes applications and their SD-WAN network. I think innovations like that are great. They drive the industry. They drive us to be better. They start the conversation about how we bring these two paradigms together. That's a big area where we see future growth. And obviously, VMware very strong in the virtualization and containerization space. So we feel like we have a chance to become the leader there. Multi-cloud connectivity continues to be critical. Applications are moving to the cloud. Applications are not only moving to the cloud, they're moving to multiple clouds. So how do I connect all of those clouds together? How do I ensure a consistent experience and a consistent security posture for users accessing all of those clouds? Security with SASE, the third strategic adjacency, obviously big growth in that area. And like we said earlier, a lot of hype in that space right now. The fourth is self-healing networks. And I think you start to see this coming about. Aruba work in that at HPE. Juniper acquired Mist, and they're looking at ways to bring AI and ML into networking. VMware, both in the data center and now with Nyansa joining the VMware SD-WAN team, we're obviously looking at ways to incorporate ML and bring more and more intelligence into networking and make it more self-driving beyond just the session failover remediation type fixes that we can do today. And the last piece is 5G. I think 5G is really going to transform a lot of networking. It really unlocks wireless for the first time, primary transport for business operations, and potentially unlocks mobility as a primary use case for business operations. And so how do you tie that into your existing SD-WAN ZTNA infrastructure? I think that's going to be another key area. So those are the 5 areas that we see and we think we can lead the market in.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, one of the things that we've seen is this rapid deployment of sub technologies within SD-WAN, if you call it that, which feels like an arms race between all of the different providers. How does VM and VeloCloud kind of manage that pace? And a customer says, well, I've just invested in Velo for my 100 sites. How do I pace along that continuum with Velo as all these new advancements happen?
Yeah, I think one of the advantages that we have at VMware is we're not doing this from scratch, right? If you look at any of those areas, there's already VMware investment either in the SD-WAN group or in other groups. And so it's more about integration, building that better together story to achieve that. So, we talked about edge compute, obviously with vSphere, with ESXi, with now Tanzu, we've got huge market presence in the virtualization space, both VM-based and container-based. And so it's not a big stretch to say, can we bring those two together? in the security space, we talked about Workspace ONE for ZTNA. There's also Carbon Black for EDR. There's also NSX, which is a leader in data center firewalling security space. So, we have a lot of security infrastructure. We've just added last line to that group as well to continue to build VMware's, presence in the security space. In multi-cloud, both the VMware SD-WAN gateways, NSX Cloud, and what they've done around cloud automation. There's a lot of work that VMware's done in that area. Something we talked about Niansa, we talked about what we've done with Project Magna in the data center. And then in 5G, obviously, the VMware Telco BU is one of the leaders in building the infrastructure that's actually running the 5G networks underneath. And then we have groups like Uhana that are doing AI and ML monitoring of that infrastructure. So we're already there in all of those places. So it's not like I'm talking about building things from scratch. One of the advantages for us now that we're part of VMware is that we get to work with all of these adjacent teams to deliver on this cohesive vision. So I think, you buy one solution from VMware, you get the benefit of adding more and more over time as they come together under the single umbrella.
Right. And John, it must be, part of how, when you build us as a service provider, our release of these products and services, how do you keep pace with what a key partner like VeloCloud is doing with how we package it and provide it as a service?
Yeah, so the first it starts with a great partnership, and actually I have a QBR with the leadership team right here after this call with Steve and Sanjay and team. So there's also a advisement panel that I sit on representing CBTS, and as long as our competitors as well. And so I think there's an open flow of communication. A lot of the stuff that Craig talks about today of where we see things going, these are open communications that we have not only behind the scenes, but even, Craig and I have been on calls together with customers. And so it starts with that partnership of understanding where VMware is going, because when they hit the market, I think June 15th is when Workspace ONE officially launched. With the ZTP or the Zero Trust with VeloCloud, the work from home offering, right? And that for me, we've got to know that ahead of time, and that's what those partnerships do. So it's understanding, and obviously things are under NDA, so we don't go to our partners with it, but it's understanding on the background, how do we set it up? Is it setting it up through something that we go to market traditionally with an OpEx model with our VMware SD-WAN? We also specifically built out a public hosted orchestrator, and Craig talks about these different cloud gateways, specifically for the use case of maybe our customers want to buy it themselves. Maybe they want to buy the hardware, and maybe it shouldn't be on our VeloCloud orchestrator, and maybe we shouldn't have the keys to the kingdom. Maybe we should be able to come in and just manage it if that's what the customer wants. And so for us, it's staying in lockstep and then understanding how the customer wants to consume or what the customer wants to buy. We're working on, we just deployed VRNI, so Virtual Network Insights, for a very large healthcare customer that we have on 280 hospitals on our VeloCloud as a service deployment. We integrated, they said, well, we already have VRNI, we're running NSX in the data center. And so that was an easy pitch for us to finish that rollout, but they said, we want to consume that as licensing. We already have an ELA with VMware. So our job is to understand what it is. How do we understand what it is? It's staying in lockstep. So we've Workspace ONE trials going on in our lab, and we're ready to deploy those to customers. But it's also understanding that not every VMware product is designed for telco or is designed for service provider, and there are ELAs in place. How do we allow customers through contract vehicles, through professional services, through managed services, and through our traditional offering? So we understand where it's going and when it's getting there. We understand ahead of time because of the partnership, and then we build packages that allow our customers to consume how they want to, because they may have already had VMware relationships prior to the VMware Velo acquisition or the Niansa acquisition or the Carbon Black. It's how do we support those?
Okay, that's great.
Rob, do we have time for another question here? I don't know where we are time-wise.
We're about to wrap up, so why don't you ask a question here, Matt, and then we'll thank Craig for joining us.
I wanted to bring up too, a lot of this conversation we've been having maybe feels a little bit upmarket, feels a little bit enterprise in some certain regards. And we've had, really the vast majority of our success in the 5 to 50 location business. We've got customers with 1,000 locations, but a lot of those smaller SMB companies. Craig, can you talk a little bit about what your team's thoughts are about the penetration or the usefulness more in the mid-market space? Kind of interested what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're fortunate to have had success on both ends of the spectrum. I think in a lot of ways, there's almost more value on the SMB space to this cloud delivered approach because
I think so. Yep.
Because if I'm a Fortune 100 company, maybe I already have my own Equinix data centers, maybe I already have my own cloud exchange built out, and while things like DMPO provide tremendous value, maybe the gateway is not as interesting to me, and so we see that in very, very large companies. In the SMB space and the mid-market space, then you don't usually have the luxury of having a huge IT budget, a huge infrastructure, a huge cloud presence. And so if you can get this cloud on-ramp for free, you can get this management portal, you can get this network that is much simpler to manage and operate. And when in a lot of cases, your IT team is also managing your WAN, it can help significantly reduce the burden and allow you to be more flexible and nimble in your operation. So I totally agree that down market, there's a huge play for VMware SD-WAN in particular because of those values.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, Craig, anything we've missed here today? Really appreciate your time. Any other thoughts or topics you'd like to add?
No, I think my dog is trying to add a couple thoughts. I just want to thank you guys for being a partner. It's really great to have this partnership. It's really great for me at this for 7.5 years, who wrote the DMPO protocol way back when, and to see it used and to see it successful in the market all these years later. It's really nice. And John talked about our partnership being critical. The feeling is mutual. Having partners like CBTS out there selling VMware SD-WAN and evangelizing it and supporting our customers is what's allowed us to be so successful. And so, we really appreciate you as well. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, the honor is ours. Thank you so much for joining us. I think your dog wants to go for a walk, but thank you so much, and we'll relay any questions, Gabby. We'll get back to anybody that's posted private questions. We'll either have those answered by John, Matt, or maybe even Craig. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.